Posterior capsular rupture during phacoemulsification. In this case, I'm going to show you some tips in how to deal with the posterior capsular rupture. You can see now the rupture of the posterior capsule while removing the cortex. Here is a case of phacoemulsification, starting with 2.2 clear cornea incision, injecting dispersive OVD inside the AC, then doing a beautiful high capsular rhexis, good hydrodissection, starting phacoemulsification with horizontal chop technique. You can see the pupil starts to constrict, and you can see the floating of the iris inside the anterior chamber. This is a case of the floppy iris. I continue emulsifying this cataract. Here I inject my drain to dilate the pupil. You can see the pupil is dilated slightly, and also injecting again dispersive OVD. Continue emulsifying the second half of this dense cataract. You can see the floating of the iris inside the anterior chamber. The anterior chamber looks unstable. Now this is the cortical shell. While I'm trying to aspirating this shell with the phaco probe, I touch the posterior capsule and the posterior capsule is opened. Here is very important to control your panic and to inject dispersive OVD to prevent prolapsing of the vitreous into the anterior chamber. Now I'm going to remove this cortex using the aspiration probe, using the dry cortical removal technique without inserting the aspiration, without inserting the irrigation inside the anterior chamber to prevent any turbulence inside the anterior chamber. You can see after removing the cortex, I inject dispersive to prevent the prolapsing of the vitreous into the anterior chamber. This step actually needs time to remove the cortex using the dry cortical removal with the aspiration probe, and it's crucial step to re-inject a dispersive OVD many times to prevent the vitreous prolapse into the anterior chamber. You can see here injecting the dispersive. You can see I have a good remnant of posterior capsule. Also the anterior capsular remnant is intact. Now continue drying removal of the cortex. As I said, this step needs to be patient and it takes time to remove the cortex. Injecting again and removing the cortex from the other side port. I was lucky that nothing was dropped into the vitreous cavity. You can see removing the cortex, dry removal of the cortex. Here actually about most of the cortex was removed. Now I change to remove the cortex with the large cannula connected to 5 cc syringe. You can see here a large piece of the cortex was heading opposite of the capsular rupture behind the iris. So I use the Sinsky together with the chopper to push the iris and getting this cortex to be at the plane of the iris or in front of the iris to remove it with the large cannula connected to 5 cc. Again, you can see this is large cortical piece. Injecting the dispersive OVD behind it and try to dry aspiration of this cortex using the large cannula connected to 5 cc. again trying to getting this cortex anteriorly using the sense key and moving the iris with the shoulder. You can see the cortex now, it's clear, and now using the large cannula connected to 5 cc to remove the cortex. Now you can see the cortex was removed almostly. Now I'm injecting again the dispersive. Now here is the cohesive to implant the IOL. Actually, it's very important in like this case to implant a 3 pieces IOL, but unfortunately the proper power for this case wasn't available, so I found myself obligate to implant single piece IOL. The IOL was implanted with the haptic in the sulcus. Actually, I have many cases with single piece and I have very good results, but it's much better to implant the 3 pieces IOL with the 3 pieces in the sulcus. Here you can see that pupil was constricted after injecting my hole inside the anterior chamber. You can see that surgery was the dealing with this complication was good. Actually, it's very important to inject Kinaport by the end of the surgery to be sure that there is no bridges in the AC, which I didn't make it. Thank you for watching this video.